Welcome to the Thrive and Shine podcast on behalf of One Day, Day One Coaching. We're here to talk to real people about real issues in health and fitness and provide enough value that you can either help yourselves or others live healthier and happier lives. Let's get into the episode. Off you go, Richard. Introduce yourselves to whoever is going to watch and listen.
Yeah, I am Richard Lightfoot. Been involved in youth sport, PE teaching for about 20 years now. Currently researching and looking into all things sort of youth development, strength and conditioning, athletic development, and similarly to self, Alki started out in football coaching, and it's just led me along this path to where I am now, and we shall see where we get to. How about yourself?
A bit of a long windy road to here, really. Started off with me playing sport, never that great, so I know if anyone pulls me up on that I was a bang average footballer at best. Played to a half decent standard, I suppose, but then started coaching once I knew that dream was over. Got into coaching, coached at Luton Town Academy, and really that's my first stepping into coaching at any kind of level with any sport. So great experience, and from there just really working in sport in various kind of roles. Worked in schools as well, at that time it was PPA coaching, so junior school, primary school, all that sort of stuff, really providing PPA cover. Sports coaching, and then qualified as a nutrition coach, and later on now really looking at how we can put that all back in one way, shape, or the other, really. So long and windy road, but here we are together. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
So let's jump straight into it then. So the first question, I guess, then is really setting the scene. So what is the landscape? What are you seeing right now with all the students that are coming through and all those years of experience that you've got in terms of health and fitness? What does it look like?
So my major thing that I'm seeing at the minute is just like a lack of ability across the board. Like the ability that I'm seeing into my school seems to have reduced. There are exceptions at both ends, but I think there's a huge dip in that. I don't know whether it's just ability or the actual engagement or the want to be good at sport. I don't know whether that's sort of fallen as well. And I know, on most podcasts and everything, the COVID pandemic gets mentioned, that may have had an impact, but it's we are, when we receive our children now at the lower end of the school, we're having to really backfill the basics, the fundamental motor skills. They're where we're sort of seeing the gaps. And then when you think about a bigger picture of health, the statistics about childhood obesity are quite very worrying. They're stark that 10%, I think it is, of reception age children are now obese, with even more being overweight. And then we get the height and weight measurements of year 6 children. Again, that's 20 odd percent are obese and another 14% are overweight, I think. So the health, I mean, these statistics are all out there to find. So if we need to fact check them, we can, but I'm sure it's around about that number. Basically, the health of those children, I think, is definitely worsening, and it's a trend that's been going on since I came into the sort of sporting and teaching world. Is we've been having this conversation of how fit and healthy are the children? Oh, they've got worse again, but we don't seem to be changing much. So it's definitely there that some work needs to be done. And then from my point of view, I don't really see the end point. So I see them in school as children that we try and affect positively, but you kind of catch them at the other end. So they've gone through school and they're maybe not the most sporty, not the most athletic, maybe they're unfit or overweight, but then we sort of pass them on. But then how does that present itself in adult life where you might pick them up?
Yeah, so working in the corporate world now, been here for 7 years or so anyway. Um, Do you know what? It's interesting and scary both the same because those children obviously then going to grow up into adults, and I guess if they haven't fixed it, either through help and support from family and whoever else, schools, sports clubs, whatever else it might be, that adult is coming through to the other end. And with the statistics, I think I posted something a little while ago around 64% or something like that. 64% of adults are overweight or living with obesity. We know that we can discount because from sporting backgrounds now, we've both probably played with, whether it's in football, rugby, whatever it would be. Rugby is a good example, right? So you could have somebody that technically, according to BMI scales, is overweight, say if they were a forward, but physically, in terms of their cardiovascular health and stuff like that, they're incredibly fit, right? So you can probably get that little group and say, right, well, they might actually be a part of that statistic. Statistics are a bit dodgy like that, right? So you could say that they're there, but that only accounts for a tiny proportion, which means a whole lot of adults are overweight and living with obesity. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. So if you're thinking about just trips, whether it's work trips away or going to the office or whatever like that, there are many of those colleagues or people that I've seen spent time around that are in that position, and quite a few are vocal. That's really what's really interesting, and maybe it's because of what goes on now with social media and stuff like that, where people are talking about it a lot more. So there are quite a lot of people that understand this is the position they're in, but they're still in that position. So it sounds really similar. And then when we're talking about fitness, so that's the health part, the fitness, pretty much the same. You do get, and you've probably met some of these people as well along your travels where they had a base of fitness. So they could have been a footballer, for example, or an athlete or a swimmer. And then they maybe dipped out, something happened, they just grew up and found girls, boys, whatever it might be, drink, drugs, whatever, and then they kind of veered off the path, but they have that base. So they could spring back if they chose to. Some do, some find it again, whether it's the passion for the sport or whatever. But largely, again, I think that only accounts for a small portion. Largely, you've got people who are unhealthy and unfit and don't have a base to build from. So what are the biggest challenges that you face then? So that being the landscape, what are the challenges you face with two things? Thinking about participation, but then also progress. What are the kind of biggest challenges and barriers you face in those two things, progress and participation? Yeah.
Um, yeah, participation is kind of. I'll do that one first because I think that's the subsequent or knock-on effect is that they don't make the progress if they're not in that participation sort of area as well. So where we pick up children, whether I'm teaching or coaching, and it's at a young age, by the age of sort of 5, 6, 7, that's where we've got to make sure that they've got those fundamental movement skills in place. They're ready to go on and start linking these movements together. So they need them in. They need to be able to confidently produce those movements in isolation. And what I'm sort of seeing is there's children that regularly engage with sport through parental help. They pay to go for a sports club. They enjoy it. So those ones are fine. But there's a big gap where the sort of the sports have become harder for everybody to go and play because they become an expense. And then those children are kind of not getting those fundamental movement skills in place through their sport. And maybe they're not getting it through their physical education lessons as well. So they're then already at a disadvantage against those children that are going out and playing sport. So then when they get to around 6, 7, 8, 9, and they're starting to compete or compare themselves to their peers, they're not as successful. If you don't have success, you're not going to want to do something. And then just through that process, they switch off. So participation, I think, is one mainly around sort of the lower abilities, and children perceiving themselves as not very good already at that really young age. They might not want to take part. And that obviously drives their, this, I've seen it in my school where it is year 3s and year 4 children. So they're 7 or 8 already unsure about their place in a PE lesson or a sports lesson unless we do something for specifically for them to, gain them some success within that lesson. And then that the knock-on effect is that their progress is slower because they haven't got those skills to rely on, and we do a lot of work lower down the school, filling those gaps in. So the curriculum isn't um, games based, it's skills based a lot of the time for those fundamental movement skills for sort of groups of learners that need them. Um, yeah, and I think if we get that right earlier, whether it's through school or outsourced coaching, then we can have a really positive effect on the progress that these children make. Um, is it similar? Again, back to you with sort of adult. You see in your remit that they maybe haven't got the skill set to go and join a gym, or is it maybe a different thing that puts them off engaging?
Yeah, do you know what I find really weird, right? So we're children of sort of 80s, 90s when yeah, and this is one of those kind of old, I guess, like back in my old days type thing. But this has to be a discussion, right? That a lot of our plays we're talking about sport here, but we're forgetting that at that time, maybe not forgetting, but we're acknowledging it now that at that time there was a lot of play through other stuff. So, for
Mm,
example, you might have gone out with your mates. We'll be on the streets or in like at the park. I was sporty anyway, so we played football and whatever else it was. So you were getting a lot of hours in doing that, which wasn't guided. It wasn't by a coach or anything, but you're just playing with your mates. There's even random games like like random ones like runouts and stuff like that.
mm,
Where when we're talking about those fundamental movements, listening to what you were just saying there makes so much sense, right? And I don't know if I'm oversimplifying it or, rose tinted glasses that things were better, but I just think that a lot of those games, if you're talking about like plyo movements, like bounding from one leg to the other when you're trying to dodge through, groups of people, and even some of the more ridiculous games that you had at school that ended up getting banned because people were getting like clotheslined and stuff like that. But they were all quite similar, weren't they? Where you were
mm,
using a lot of those kind of movements that we're talking about that they're lacking. Now, bringing it back to the thing about the adults, this is what confuses me because we're talking about people that are our age or older or even a little bit younger who had that base. So whilst they might not have had a sport background, they were definitely outdoorsy people when they were younger, or more of them were. I'm not saying everyone. And so that's really what I find confusing is that when you're having conversations with people who are, let's just pick a group. So say there's a group of people that have said, do you know what? Reached that point, I need something to change. Um, it seems ridiculous to suggest like getting out into nature and just doing some of those kind of like we said, like basic things like get walking or doing things that are easy that you can use your body doing. But that seems like it's also too far. And the issue with that is that you've got swathes of people who are not even doing that. So the chances of them then picking up a sport or going into the gym is quite far removed, unless there's
mm,
some desperation attached to it. And I think that this is kind of the reason why the fitness industry exists, right? Well, I don't know if that's how they sell it or market it, but unfortunately, it's what happens that you get this recidivism. You get people that will go to the gym till they've lost the 30 kilograms they need to lose, and they'll be like, well, I've done it now, and that's it, and then around they go. And so there are pockets of people who pick things up and maintain it, but largely you've just got this cycle of people who don't have a base, haven't really worked on themselves so that they understand how their bodies move, what they're capable of, and all that kind of stuff. But they'll just jump straight to go into doing those stupid Joe Wicks things where they're bouncing around their room like idiots or chucking weights around just so they can get the weight off and then that's it again. So yeah, you're finding this real kind of mix of people that some pick things up and go along and carry on and make it sustainable, and others that flit in and out, and then you've got whole groups of others that just no ha- won't do it, can't do it, and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
yeah, I think that the biggest challenges are getting them to really think about things in that really simplistic way, which sadly people just they don't until things are desperate, basically. So what would you say then if we're talking to, whether they're parents or other practitioners, what kind of methodology do you use now before we get onto the kind of takeaways, to drill it down into the couple, what kind of things do you use and do now that, you know, can help to get over some of those barriers?
Um, Lots that I've changed since starting. Um, Definitely since having my own children and looking at their kind of thirst for movement and thinking, right, we're doing something horribly wrong if we put them off. So it's, partly giving them the opportunity to move. Again, whether it's coaching or PE teaching, they've got to be busy in lessons. Got to be busy in sessions. I think it's the FA that I'm sure it's the FA have got their 80% ball rolling time that I use as a kind of marker in everything that I'm doing. That 80% of the time they need to be moving. They've got to have a piece of equipment. They've got to be, part of the action. Going away from that, the old school PE teaching where you stand in line and or football coaching in particular was the worst. Because you stand in line, you lay it into the coach is brilliant at laying the ball off to the left or the right, and someone gets to whack it at goal. So just sort of removing all of that, so that they get more time to produce the skills that you want them to do or the movement patterns that you want them to do, because through that process, obviously they'll get better at it. There's a course that I did through Motor Academy or Motor Learning Academy, I think it is. And one of the phrases they had that I've pinched and stolen is children don't fall in love with something they cannot do. And quite simply, if we set up whatever game now, we have to build in success so that if they find they can do something, they might get to the point where they want to come back and do more of it. And then once you've got that in there successful, you can think about how you're going to stretch and challenge and all that kind of stuff about, is it in their, zone of proximal development? Can we get them in just enough stretch? But essentially, can we set them up to be successful more often in whatever it is? And can we get them moving as much as possible? And in the courses that I've delivered that are sort of to, trainee teachers around PE has always been, get the equipment out and let them start to use it. And don't be afraid to have those maybe 10, 15 minutes where you're not trying to control the group. You're ensuring they're safe, but they're being creative and moving. And then they've had that opportunity. Right now we can start to bolt some skills on. But it's a lot of movement, utilizing the time wisely to build the fundamental movement skills. But ensuring that success, I probably say, is the most important thing that we've done.
I mean, again, it's ridiculous saying it really that there's just not much of a difference when you think about adults. But I feel like because as adults we'll complicate things much more. Like you say, with children, if you give them the opportunity to thrive, pun intended on the name, but they will really, won't they? I think with
Yeah.
adults, because of life, family, jobs, all these things that are kind of creating the fog in the mind, that we don't realize that it is as simple as that. And I think so. Talking to people that will, I'm sure, do the same with you, where they'll kind of corner you and say, "Well, how do you do this?" or "How can I do this?" And a lot of the time, because of social media and everything else, it feels like it's a really complicated thing. And when you're talking about just, like, getting back to basics, like if you want to be healthier and fitter, you don't have to jump straight into like a change program or anything like that. There's so many things that you can do to just get going. And again, something you just said there, which really resonates, is around. I have a real problem with people that feel like they have to jump from one thing to straight into something complicated, because feel like they're setting themselves up for failure. And also the thing that you mentioned is around you know having to what was it about loving something? How did you phrase that about?
Children don't fall in love with something unless they're successful, more or less.
Exactly, yeah. And I don't think it's any different from us. Like if you're somebody that's never been in a gym before and it's an utterly miserable experience, Well, it
Mm.
doesn't really, it's not going to shock you to think, oh, well, I might not go to that again, or, how long it takes. So it really is about finding things that, you can do and get some success out of and just build on top of that. So running's another good one. Again, I don't know, people might have this idea that you have to then be able to run, but nobody said anything about that. And there's loads of plans out there where, like a couch to 5K, and there's loads of walking involved in that. So it's not like you have to go from A to B in the quickest way possible. The idea is to actually enjoy going from A to B. And if you do that, then there's every chance that it will stick. So I think, yeah, with adults, it's almost exactly the same. I just think we think it's more complicated because we're adults. I just don't think it is. So
Even
just
even
rounding off then.
myself.
Oh, sorry, go on.
So I was just gonna say, even for myself, like there's times I get lost in that world of trying to be perfect with what I'm doing for my physical health, and it's just keep it simple, consistently get out and do something, which I know that's kind of what you preach as well. So yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there's this. I've seen loads of these things where about something is better than nothing, and then some people are saying, but it depends on what that something is, right? Relative to the person. Like if you are 40, 50 kilograms overweight, then just walking to the shops is a big deal. But obviously, if you're not in that physical condition, then it's relative in terms of what that something is and what impact that has on you. Um, but I just feel like that's still trying to overcomplicate it. I don't think people need to worry too much about it. Like if you spend every single day sat down, then getting up and just walking around the block this week, next week, whatever, it is better. Yes, it's not like interval training. No, it's not lifting weights. But the point is that you'll slowly build those blocks. If you try to go from sitting down 7 days a week to doing all of this sort of stuff, the chances are, people will fail. That's the reason why you get people that just keep going back round and round in these circles. So
Mm.
yeah, I feel like the something is better than nothing has some legs to it. So what would you say then if you were just going to kind of break it down to like literally one or two key points then in terms of things that you would advise, whether this is a parent, as I said before, listening to this, or a practitioner, what are the most important things for you?
Uh, Building opportunities for success is going to be like my main thing that you've in whatever, especially being a parent involved in now coaching my own son and being in charge of, I say in charge, but being the head coach of a group of kind of parents, dads, mums that have said, put their hand up to say, yeah, I will help. So for those people that really want to do a good job, essentially just plan the session so they're going to be successful. Because although there's a lot of talk around it's got to be fun, and it has, but it will be if you build the opportunities for success in. Um, so, and think about those different types of abilities that you've got. So, within those sessions, they need to be successful at their level. Um, if it's a broad spectrum sort of community coaching session or a PE lesson, um, how you group your learners as well. Have you spoken to the children to see if they want to work with their friends? Have you spoken to them to see, actually, I really want to go with the top group because I want to test myself, or I'm really not comfortable playing in a group with X, Y, and Z, and because you know, their physical age is, 12, 13, 14, and my physical age is 10. They're just bigger and stronger than me, and it's a really uncomfortable experience. So those two things probably go hand in hand as well. If you get your groupings right, then you're going to have more opportunity for all of those children to be successful in whatever task you've set them, but just ensure there are moments where they're going to be successful. Yeah, probably those two for starters, especially for those like new emerging coaches, PE teachers. That would be key for me, and keep them moving. Actually, yeah, how active can you make your lessons? Would be a good one as well. And you for our let's go with. I'm going to give you a little scenario
Go on then.
to a takeaway for. You mentioned the adult that was sporty and has maybe left sport for whatever reason, um, and they may be on their way back. What's the key thing that's going to get them back on track and keep them there?
Yeah, that's a really good one actually, because I feel like as much as in terms of how often I was, involved in sport or whatever, it doesn't take very long for this scenario to happen, right? And for me, there was a period of, and you've seen the pictures, haven't you? So if anyone's watching now, so they won't believe me, but you've seen it was about 2 years, I think, 2.5 years between finishing football. I took up, weightlifting, started working with a bodybuilder and PT here in Luton, and then that was the moment that I kind of fell away and my weight just ballooned up. So I carried on eating like a bulking weightlifter and just wasn't moving or wasn't doing anything, to be honest, just eating and drinking. Um, and I think that the key thing for me for that kind of population, I guess, would be to tap into that drive and the motivation. It has to be something, right? So for me, football was gone. I didn't really latch on to weightlifting as much as thought I was going to, which is why it was so easy for me to fall off. And I guess it was time to find that new thing. For me, it was endurance sports. So whether it's half marathons, triathlons, and things like that. Once I latched on to that, that kind of inner drive from what I was like when I played football, regardless of how good I was, that's irrelevant. How I applied myself to it is a different story. If I could have played like I trained, I'd have been a professional. But sadly, you don't get contracts for how well you train. So yeah, I think that was it. That was all it was. Is trying to find the thing that would reignite that kind of drive and motivation, desire, all that kind of stuff. And I found it through endurance sports. So for that group, that's what it's about. I don't think it's any different to anyone else, really. I think those people that are, say, if you're, in a situation where you're 30 kilograms overweight, you may not have had a base of sport. I think it's the same thing. You still need to find the thing that is going to light that fire and that will catch your attention, whatever else. It might take a bit longer because you don't have that experience to draw on to know what does it feel like. Somebody who's played rugby, at a good level when they were younger, they know what it feels like. They remember those days where they were running out and thinking this is great, and that applies for any sport, anything. So yeah, I think it's about that, getting back to basics and finding that thing that creates that inner drive and motivation.
Cool.
Good stuff. Well, that's it. We've reached the end of our first one, setting the scene for our Thrive and Shine podcast, and we'll be back talking about more of these themes, I guess, in more detail, and there'll be plenty more from us. So goodbye from me.
Thanks, Alki. Goodbye from me.